Ronnie O'Neal III, the Florida family murder that shocked the nation. On the night of March 18, 2018, a horrifying scene unfolded in Riverview, Florida, a scene so brutal, so senseless, and so chaotic that even seasoned investigators struggled to comprehend it. Inside a burning home, firefighters discovered nightmare. A mother murdered with a shotgun, a young girl stabbed and set on fire, and a little boy, gravely wounded but still alive, who had crawled out of the smoke and flames, fighting for his life. The boy, Ronnie O'Neal IV, was only 8 years old, and yet, despite the devastation around him, he managed to tell first responders a sentence they would never forget. "My daddy did it." The attacker was not a stranger, not an intruder, not a masked killer hiding in the dark. It was his own father, Ronnie O'Neal III. O'Neal's rampage became one of Florida's most disturbing and unforgettable family murders. But what made the case even more shocking came 3 years later, inside a courtroom packed with reporters and spectators. Ronnie O'Neal III chose to represent himself, shouting at the jury, denying evidence, accusing the government of conspiracy, and then facing the unthinkable. His own son took the stand against him. This is the story of a family destroyed, a child who survived the impossible, and a courtroom drama unlike anything Florida had ever seen. A family in crisis, the chaos before the murder. Long before the shocking events of March 18, 2018, the family of Ronnie O'Neal III, Kenya Barty, and their 2 children lived in a fragile, unstable environment. To outsiders, they appeared like any other family in their Riverview neighborhood. But behind closed doors, tension simmered for years, tension fueled by mental instability, paranoia, and a growing sense that Ronnie O'Neal was slipping further and further into delusion. A man unraveling. Ronnie O'Neal III was known in the community as loud, unpredictable, and deeply paranoid. His social media was filled with strange rants, religious proclamations, conspiracy theories, and claims that the government was targeting him. He believed he was being watched. He believed people were plotting against him. And he believed he had a divine mission to fight evil. Friends and relatives would later tell investigators that O'Neal's behavior had been deteriorating for years. He was controlling, aggressive, and prone to fits of rage. Kenya Barty, his girlfriend and the mother of his children, often tried to manage his outbursts, but she, too, had struggled with mental health issues. Inside the home, arguments were frequent. Threats were common, and the children, 8-year-old Ronnie IV and 9-year-old Ron Nivea, lived in an atmosphere that could shift from calm to explosive without warning. The night everything broke. On the evening of March 18, 2018, neighbors heard yelling coming from the O'Neal residence. It wasn't unusual, but this time, the screams were different. They were panicked, terrified, violent. At 11:43 p.m., a chilling 911 call came into the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. The caller was Kenya Barty. Her voice trembled with fear as she pleaded for help. In the background, the operator could hear shouting, screams, and then a gunshot. The call abruptly cut off. Moments later, neighbors saw flames rising from the home. Something catastrophic was happening inside. The first victim. When investigators pieced together the events, they learned the terrifying sequence. Ronnie O'Neal attacked Kenya first, shooting her with a shotgun at close range. She collapsed near the front door, unable to escape. Her last moments were captured on that desperate 911 call. The children targeted. What happened next was even more horrific. In a violent frenzy, O'Neal turned his rage toward the children. He beat and stabbed his 9-year-old daughter, Ron Nivea, a girl with autism who could not speak. He then attempted to set her on fire. Finally, he went after his son, Ronnie IV, stabbing him repeatedly with a kitchen knife. Covered in blood, terrified, and fighting to survive, the boy managed to flee the burning house. He crawled through smoke, past flames through the yard, until emergency responders found him, barely conscious. One of the first firefighters on the scene knelt beside him, and the child whispered, "My daddy killed my mommy." He had lost everything, but he had lived. A house of horror. By the time police entered the home, the fire had consumed most of the structure. They discovered Kenya's body near the entrance and Ron Nivia's charred, lifeless form inside the building. The crime shocked even veteran investigators. One officer later said, "In all my years, I've never seen anything like that. Not from a stranger. Not from a parent." The surviving boy was rushed to the hospital with severe stab wounds, burns, and trauma. Doctors were stunned he had survived it all. Meanwhile, Ronnie O'Neal III was arrested at the scene, shirtless, covered in blood, and screaming at officers about demons and conspiracies. The horror of that night would soon give way to an even stranger spectacle, a courtroom showdown that no one could have predicted. The trial from hell, when Ronnie O'Neal defended himself. The crimes of March 18, 2018, were horrifying, but what happened 3 years later in the courtroom became one of the most bizarre, disturbing trials in modern Florida history. Because Ronnie O'Neal III, charged with the murders of his girlfriend and daughter and the attempted murder of his son, made a stunning decision. He would serve as his own attorney. No legal training, no experience, no grasp of courtroom procedure, but endless confidence in his own delusions. The judge tried to warn him. Court-appointed attorneys begged him not to. But O'Neal insisted he would fight the system himself because, in his mind, he wasn't just a defendant. He was a warrior chosen to expose corruption, government lies, and supposed conspiracies. "I am not guilty." From the moment he opened his mouth, the courtroom knew this trial would be unlike any other. During his opening statement, O'Neal shouted at the jury, pounded on the podium, and accused the state of altering evidence, lying about the murders, and hiding the truth. He screamed, "They are trying to make me look crazy, but the truth is going to come out." He repeatedly insisted that he had acted in self-defense, a claim completely unsupported by any evidence. Jurors stared in disbelief. Prosecutors remained silent, letting him unravel. The prosecution's case. The state of Florida presented a mountain of evidence. 911 recordings, forensic reports, autopsy findings, burn analysis, blood evidence, digital records, eyewitness testimony, and most damning of all, Ronnie's own surviving son. Everything painted a picture of a brutal, intentional family attack, not a spontaneous act or a defensive struggle. But Ronnie O'Neal didn't respond to evidence. He responded with rage. Every objection the prosecutor made, O'Neal shouted back. Every time the judge spoke, he argued. Every witness, he accused of lying. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the moment he cross-examined the one person he had nearly killed. The courtroom gasps. On June 15, 2021, the small, scarred, soft-spoken survivor, now 11 years old, took the stand. He walked slowly, his hands folded. He looked up only once, toward the defense table, where his father sat. Prosecutors questioned him gently. "Did your father hurt you that night?" The boy nodded. "Did he hurt your sister?" He nodded again. Then came a nightmare moment. The killer questions his own son. Because O'Neal was representing himself, the court had no choice. He had the legal right to cross-examine his son. The courtroom went completely silent as Ronnie O'Neal stood up, walked toward the witness stand, and stared into the eyes of the boy he had tried to murder. The child trembled. O'Neal's voice boomed. "Did I kill your mother?" The boy whispered. "Yes, you did." O'Neal smiled, a chilling, twisted grin, then tried to imply that the boy had been manipulated by the state. But the child stayed strong. When asked how he survived, he replied, "I just ran. I just didn't want to die." The jury watched Ronnie's face. They watched the boy's bravery. And in that moment, they saw everything they needed to see. The trial's breaking point. By the time prosecutors rested their case, the jury had heard graphic details, heartbreaking testimony, expert analysis, fire investigation results, medical descriptions of the children's injuries. And still, O'Neal shouted, argued, and ranted. He even tried to present his own evidence, none of which made sense. He screamed about demons, government plots, and religious conspiracies. The judge kept order, but the trial felt like a slow descent into madness. A verdict everyone expected. After all the chaos, the jury deliberated quietly. It took them only a few hours to reach a decision. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder of Kenya Barty. first-degree murder of Ronnie O'Neal, attempted murder of his son, arson, aggravated child abuse. When the verdict was read, Ronnie O'Neal stared straight ahead, expressionless, empty, defeated. But justice wasn't finished with him. The sentencing phase was still to come, and what happened next would be both shocking and strangely poetic. Sentencing the monster. A court confronts pure evil. After the guilty verdict, the trial entered its final stage, sentencing. This was the moment where the court, the jury, and the surviving victims would finally determine Ronnie O'Neal's punishment for the horrors he unleashed on March 18, 2018. But even now, after a mountain of evidence and days of testimony, O'Neal continued behaving as though he were the victim. The judge's final warning. Before the sentencing phase began, Judge Michelle Cisco addressed O'Neal directly. "Mr. O'Neal, this courtroom is not a stage for your theatrics. You will conduct yourself respectfully during sentencing." It didn't work. O'Neal doubles down. During his final statement to the court, Ronnie O'Neal delivered another loud, chaotic monologue. He stood before the jury, shaking his finger at them, shouting about conspiracies, government lies, and divine messages. He refused to accept responsibility. He refused to show remorse. He refused even to acknowledge the suffering of his children. He screamed, "I did not kill my daughter," a claim already disproven by forensic evidence, DNA, fire analysis, witness testimony, and his surviving son. Jurors watched in disbelief. Some shook their heads. One visibly flinched every time he shouted. But the most powerful moment was still to come. The child speaks again. During the sentencing phase, victim impact statements are often the most emotional part of the trial. And this time, the young survivor, still carrying the scars of that night, stood up once more. He didn't cry. He didn't tremble. He simply spoke the truth. He said he remembered everything. The screams, the fire, the pain, the fear. He remembered trying to save his sister. He remembered begging his father to stop. He remembered running, bleeding, burning into the darkness. And then he said, "I want to live with the people who love me." A silence fell over the courtroom. Even hardened deputies looked away, fighting emotion. The prosecutor's final words. Assistant State Attorney Scott Harmon delivered a devastating closing argument. He described the cruelty, the brutality, the terror inside that burning house. He told the court that O'Neal's actions were pure evil, not madness, not confusion, intentional, calculated, unforgivable evil. He pushed for the maximum sentence. The defense's only argument. Though O'Neal represented himself, standby counsel handled the sentencing argument. They begged the jury to consider his mental illness. They argued he needed treatment, not death. They pleaded for mercy. But mercy was something Ronnie O'Neal had never shown his family. The jury decides his fate. After hours of deliberation, the jury made their decision. They rejected the death penalty, but only by the narrowest of margins. Instead, they recommended life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was the harshest sentence possible short of execution. The judge's final statement. Judge Cisco addressed O'Neal one last time. Her voice did not shake. Her eyes did not soften. She told him, calmly and clearly, "The crimes you committed are beyond understanding. The cruelty, unimaginable. You left a trail of devastation that your surviving child will carry for life." Then she added words that would echo across news headlines. "Mr. O'Neal, I am sentencing you to 3 consecutive life sentences plus 60 years. I wish I could give you more." For the first time, O'Neal was silent, taken away forever. As deputies escorted him out, he continued muttering under his breath, still insisting he was framed, still blaming everyone but himself. But the doors closed behind him. The trial was over. The chaos, the shouting, the delusions, all of it ended the moment he entered the prison system. There, he would spend the rest of his life. Every hour, every day, every year, alone with the consequences of what he did. Justice had spoken, but the story was not finished. Because one small survivor, the boy who crawled out of the flames, still had a future to build. The boy who lived, a survivor's journey through trauma and healing. In the ashes of the O'Neal family tragedy, one story emerged that stunned even seasoned investigators: the survival of Ronnie O'Neal IV, the child who crawled out of a burning home after being stabbed, beaten, and nearly killed. His survival was nothing short of miraculous. A body broken, but alive. When first responders found him, the 8-year-old boy was barely conscious. He had multiple stab wounds to his abdomen and chest, severe burns from the fire, blunt force trauma, smoke inhalation, and deep psychological shock. Paramedics rushed him to Tampa General Hospital. Doctors worked through the night. They were astonished he survived the blood loss alone. One surgeon later said, "It's extraordinary that he made it. Children don't often survive wounds like his." But physical wounds were only the beginning. The emotional toll would last a lifetime. The search for safety. In the days following the murders, authorities faced an important decision. Who would care for the only living witness? Extended family members came forward, desperate to protect him. They attended court hearings, cried with detectives, and begged the judge to allow the child into their custody. Ultimately, he was placed with a loving foster family who specialized in caring for traumatized children. They provided stability, something he had never truly known. Nightmares, therapy, and silence. Trauma doesn't disappear with time. It lingers. And for this young survivor, healing became a long, difficult road. He suffered night terrors, waking up screaming, drenched in sweat, calling for his mother. He was afraid of the dark, afraid of loud voices, afraid of being alone. Therapists worked closely with him, using trauma-focused cognitive therapy, play therapy, memory reconstruction, trust-building techniques, and grief counseling. Slowly, he began to speak again, not just about the trauma, but about his hopes, dreams, and memories of his sister, a bond that couldn't be broken. He often talked about Ronnie, his sister, a little girl with autism who couldn't speak, but who loved music and would dance in place whenever she heard rhythm. He told his foster family, "I try to help her. I try to stop it." Those words haunted everyone who heard them, but they also revealed his heart. A boy who survived not because he was lucky, but because he was brave. A new home, a new life. Eventually, after many court evaluations and family screenings, a relative was approved to adopt him. He moved into a permanent home surrounded by cousins, aunts, and grandparents who cherished him. He started school again. He made friends. He laughed, something no one knew if he would ever do again. And slowly, the wounds on his body healed. The scars, though visible, became reminders not of pain, but of survival. His powerful court statement. Before sentencing, he read a written victim statement. He looked up at the judge and said, "I'm doing good. I have people who love me now, and I'm healing." For everyone in the courtroom, it was clear. The boy who had every reason to be broken was choosing to rise instead. The legacy of survival. Today, the survivor of the O'Neal tragedy is still protected by privacy laws. His name is hidden. His location kept secret. His school and community shield him from the public eye. And that is exactly how it should be. What the world doesn't know is this: he is safe. He is loved. He is rebuilding his life. And he continues to heal from trauma no child should ever endure. Despite everything he faced, he carries a strength far greater than the man who tried to destroy him. He is the living proof that even in unspeakable horror, a spark of hope can survive the flames. Inside the mind of a killer, what drove Ronnie O'Neal to murder? The brutality of March 18, 2018, left investigators, psychologists, and the public grasping for answers. How could a father turn into a monster? What pushed Ronnie O'Neal III into a frenzy of violence so extreme that even veteran detectives were shaken? To understand the horror of that night, experts began piecing together the complex psychological and environmental forces behind the crime. A history of paranoia and delusion. Friends, neighbors, and relatives later testified that Ronnie O'Neal had been showing signs of serious mental instability for years. Symptoms included intense paranoia, frequent claims that the government was monitoring him, beliefs that strangers were plotting against his family, religious delusions that he was chosen for a divine mission, sudden rage outbursts, threatening behavior. He was known to rant about conspiracies involving demons, government corruption, and false prophets. But despite these signs, he was never formally diagnosed or consistently treated. A perfect storm of mental decline. Psychologists reviewing the case described O'Neal's mental state as a cocktail of untreated mental illness, identity instability, narcissistic traits, grandiose delusions, explosive anger. This combination can create a dangerous psychological profile, one where the individual believes their distorted thoughts are absolute truth. When confronted with stress, criticism, or perceived threats, people in this state can erupt into violence, control, and domination. One pattern stood out. Ronnie O'Neal needed to control everything: his home, his partner, his children. He reportedly monitored Kenya Barty constantly, yelled at her for disobedience, isolated her from friends and family, controlled finances and decisions, interpreted disagreement as betrayal. This is a common behavior pattern in abusive relationships, known as coercive control, where one partner dominates and terrorizes the household. When control slips, the abuser may lash out violently. The night of the fire. What triggered the final explosion of violence? Investigators believe O'Neal's paranoia reached a breaking point. That night, he reportedly became convinced that Kenya planned to expose him or leave him. He snapped. The rage that followed was not just explosive, it was methodical. He didn't just lash out. He pursued, attacked, and silenced every member of the household. This is why prosecutors argued that mental illness alone did not explain his actions. There was planning, there was intent, there was control, a delusional courtroom performance. His behavior at trial exposed just how disconnected from reality he had become. He screamed at the jury. He berated witnesses. He accused prosecutors of conspiracy. He claimed the state altered evidence. He insisted he was framed. Mental health experts observing the trial noted strong signs of persecutory delusions, narcissistic personality features, possible schizoaffective tendencies, disorganized thought patterns. Yet none of these diminished his responsibility under the law. He understood right from wrong. He simply believed he was above it. Evil illness or both? The question that haunted many was this: was Ronnie O'Neal a severely mentally ill man who spiraled into violence, or an evil man who used illness as a mask? The truth may be both. His delusions created the spark. His rage lit the fire, and his controlling, violent personality fanned the flames into a massacre. The final psychological verdict. Mental health experts concluded he was mentally unstable, but he was not insane. He knew what he was doing, and he chose to do it. He acted with intent, cruelty, and a level of brutality beyond comprehension. In the end, the question of why may never be fully answered, because even with psychological theories, one fact remains: millions of people suffer from mental illness without harming anyone. Ronnie O'Neal made a choice, a deadly one. Aftermath and legacy. The shockwaves of the O'Neal family murders. The crimes of Ronnie O'Neal III did not end with his arrest, trial, or sentencing. The destruction he caused rippled outward, affecting everyone who touched the case: the family, the community, the investigators, and even the courtroom personnel who witnessed his outbursts. This was not just a tragedy. It was a wound that scarred an entire city, a community stunned by unthinkable violence. The quiet subdivision in Riverview, Florida, where the murders occurred, had rarely seen major crime, let alone a massacre inside a family home. Neighbors who had heard screams and seen flames that night said they would never forget it. One neighbor told reporters, "We kept thinking, this can't be happening here. Not to those children." Memorials sprung up. Teddy bears, candles, and handwritten notes lined the sidewalk outside the burned home. People prayed, cried, and begged for explanations that would never fully come. The crumbling house becomes a symbol. The burnt shell of the O'Neal house stood for months, a stark, haunting reminder of what had happened inside. Eventually, the county ordered it demolished. But by then, the image of the charred doorway where Kenya Barty collapsed and the window through which her son escaped had already been etched into community memory. Investigators scarred by what they saw. Veteran detectives described the crime scene as one of the most horrifying they had ever encountered. Some required counseling. Some struggled with nightmares. At least one retired early, unable to continue working homicide. Firefighters who rescued the young boy said they never forgot the way he looked up at them, burned, bleeding, shaking, and whispered, my daddy did it." Those words stayed with them. A legal system tested. The trial pushed the Florida court system to the edge. Judges and deputies had to constantly manage Ronnie O'Neal's unpredictable behavior. Court personnel said it was the most chaotic trial they had ever seen. Constant shouting, disruptive accusations, refusal to follow procedure, emotional trauma for witnesses, and the most disturbing moment, O'Neal cross-examining his own son, was cited in legal circles as one of the darkest court moments in recent memory. A city demands answers and change. In the months following sentencing, social workers, domestic violence advocates, and mental health organizations met to discuss how a tragedy like this could be prevented. The case highlighted systemic failures, lack of mental health treatment, inconsistent domestic violence reporting, limited resources for at-risk families. Some argued that Kenya had shown signs of needing help long before the attack, but no agency stepped in. Her death, and the death of her daughter, led to renewed calls for improved support systems and protection for vulnerable families. The survivor's legacy of strength. Amid everything, the greatest symbol of hope remained the young boy who lived. His survival became a narrative of resilience taught in trauma recovery circles. Community members held fundraisers for him. Organizations donated to ensure he had long-term support. Volunteers sent him letters, toys, and cards, though many were kept private to protect his identity. To this day, he remains protected, but reports from family members say he is thriving. He loves sports. He loves video games. He likes school. He laughs again. Despite the darkness he came from, he is building a new life, one his mother and sister would be proud of. Ronnie O'Neal's final reality. Inside prison, Ronnie O'Neal is no longer the loud, domineering figure he was in court. Inmates reportedly avoid him. Guards monitor him closely. His delusions, rants, and conspiratorial speech continue. But in prison, no one listens. He is forgotten, but his victims are not. A tragedy that will never be forgotten. The O'Neal family murders remain one of Florida's most shocking and disturbing cases ever recorded. Not because of the brutality alone, but because of the betrayal at its core. A father destroying the people he was supposed to love the most. This case forces us to confront the darkest possibilities within the human mind and reminds us how fragile and precious family truly is. Thank you for diving into this haunting and heartbreaking story. The case of Ronnie O'Neal III is a chilling reminder of how quickly trust can shatter and how darkness can emerge from within the home. But it also reminds us of the incredible strength of survivors, like the brave young boy who lived to tell the truth and rebuild his future. If you found this documentary powerful, insightful, or important, like the video to support the channel. Subscribe for more real-life crime stories. Comment your thoughts below. What part of this case shocked you the most? Share this video to help more people learn about the hidden dangers of unchecked violence and untreated mental illness. Your engagement helps the channel grow and continue bringing you deep, detailed investigations into the darkest true crime cases. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, the darkest truths are often hidden in plain sight.